Okay, how does one introduce a man that is so very famous, is so synonymous with science and space exploration, that if I say butterfly tie, each and every one of you do not need any more introduction to simply know I'm talking about Bill Nye, the science guy. Bill's mission for many years has been to turn on the public in general, and kids in particular, to the way cool wonders of science, leading the Planetary Society and thus leading humanity off Earth into space is a logical consequence of this wish. Furthermore, talking about Bill, I can present you all with a list of accomplishments so long that science and Bill Nye to the masses have truly become one and the same idea. Therefore, without much further ado, I would like to present to you Bill Nye.
Very good.
It took the long way around. Greetings! Greetings, everyone. Any questions on what we've covered so far? We're going to go to Mars. Humans are going to go to Mars. It's going to be a huge party. It's going to be wild. But I remind you that in order to do this, we have to do what I like to call everything all at once. There is no one solution, one problem that has to be solved. We have to solve a great many problems at once. And I just want to remind everybody of something very, very important. First of all, I think we all agree that in order, that one of the big reasons you would want to go to Mars, rather, is to seek life. Keep in mind that it is very reasonable that there was something alive on Mars at one time. And for me, it's very reasonable there's something alive there today. And I claim that if we were to find life on this other world, it would change this one. It would change the way each and every one of us feels about being a living thing in the cosmos. It would change the way we feel about what I like to call our place in space. So for me, the main reason to go to Mars is to look for signs of life. Because it's not only, it's not just important scientifically, it's important spiritually. It would change us. It would be like Copernicus or Galileo, making these discoveries that influence everyone in the world. And furthermore, another remarkable and important aspect of it, these discoveries would not be made by a single person. They'd be made by a society who thought it was a worthy use of our intellect and treasure to understand this other world and learn more about where we all came from and answer this other deep question: are we alone in the universe? Then along that line, I think we all agree we're going to have to send both robots and humans. And we have a lot of robots there now, but to really get people there, we're going to need more robots. And just something I want everybody to keep in mind. Everybody, we live on the Earth. Human societies have been here for a long time. And we have an agreement. It goes back to 1967, the Space Treaty. And this treaty, if you've ever taken the time to read it, is essentially the Star Trek Prime Directive in legal language, that we will not contaminate another world. And any mission or any rocket that leaves any one country is to be held, the consequences of its actions are part of that country's relationship to the world. And this treaty is not trivial, everybody. The ramifications of this have the potential to be far-reaching. And I just think it's important for all of us to keep this in mind. So I'd like to again talk briefly about me. So, I am the CEO of the Planetary Society. I, as you may know, took one class from Carl Sagan back in the disco era, and I was admitted to Cornell University through, I'm sure, a mistake in the admissions department, but nevertheless, it had a tremendous influence on me. And when he started the Planetary Society in 1980, I joined, I've been a member ever since. 5.5 years ago, I took the gig as the CEO. And I like to say we do 3 things. We create, we advocate, and we educate. And you can do it like this. Here's a laser pointer. There's professors here, right? George Washington. I just want to emphasize that if you take the pointer and shake it, it doesn't help anything. Okay, just so we're all down with that. And that picture in the middle is Europa, the other moon of Jupiter that probably that has twice as much seawater as the Earth, but is reasoned that it is probable to have life. It would be quite an extraordinary thing. So missions to Mars are consistent with these 3 things that we do. We flew a spacecraft last summer. We're hoping to fly the second one, Light Sail 2, before the end of the year. It depends when SpaceX can get us on their second Falcon Heavy flight. And then we advocate. We go especially to the US Congress and petition for missions to other worlds, for planetary exploration. Because I claim that space exploration writ large brings out the best in us, and planetary exploration is where we seek answers to these 2 deep questions. Where did we all come from, and are we alone in the universe? If you want to answer those questions, you've got to explore space, and I think that's what brought us all together. Mars is the next logical place to explore. So back in 2008, the Planetary Society brought together experts from around the world, some of whom have been on stage here this morning, and we came up with what we called the roadmap, beyond the moon, how we would get beyond the moon and onto Mars. Various architectures are presented, and a philosophy that includes not only this wonderful, technical, hopeful vision of the future where we solve all the remarkable technical problems of surviving on the way and in place on Mars, but also the political problems. The political problems, everybody, are very large. And no, they're not problems. They're opportunities. And so that was written in 2008, and then NASA copied every single thing no, I kid. NASA then was influenced to some extent by the same bunch of experts who had come together before and created this famous or notorious or well-known design reference architecture 5.0. And that was cool, fabulous, but as you may know, we haven't spent a lot of money on that directed. So last spring, the Planetary Society convened another group of experts, a lot of the same ones, but then new ones have emerged. And we came up with this proposal that humans could be orbiting Mars in 2033. So what now I've shown you are 3 images of pieces of paper. Yes. What more do you need? So along this line, people often say, people of my age, and I saw some people up here this morning, people often talk about the old days of Apollo, where we had this tremendous optimism, and we built the largest rocket at that point ever built, and it was in our culture. For those of you unfamiliar with this game, Rockets to the Moon, I will do my best with the laser pointer, but it was timely, and it's important to note in the lower right that it was fun to play. Very important. And I grew up with this sort of thing, and it led to, I think, these expectations that we know that are no longer reasonable. If they can put a man on the moon, why can't they blank, whatever? And I'll tell you why. The interstate highway system cost about $114 billion, reckoned in 2010 dollars. Putting the 12 people on the moon cost 1 1/3 times that much. 150, reckoned in 2010 dollars. So if you spend 1.5 interstate highway systems, you can do extraordinary things. And at that time, the NASA budget was 4% of the US federal budget. Today, it is right around a tenth of that. It's right around 0.4%. And it's just important for all of us to keep this in mind. And one of the extraordinary things about being CEO of the Planetary Society is I get to work with these extraordinary people. And I claim that our board member, John Loxton, is the world's foremost authority on the history of space. If you want to get in a fist fight about that, we can discuss it. But Richard Nixon at one time had the famous Isaac Newton's birthday eve picture of Earthrise in his office. After the votes were secured in California to fund what became the space shuttle program, he took that picture down and put up a very nice Western landscape. And I use these two pictures to remind everybody of the political nature of space exploration, leastwise here in the United States. So you got to take the politics into account when we make plans to go to Mars. So I claim that the experts that the Planetary Society convened last spring have done that. And they proposed some architectures to get people in orbit around Mars in 2033 without increasing the NASA budget, just adjusting it for inflation. Well, that's an increase, I know, but it's one that you could plan for. So, there's a lot of information on charts like this, but I will wave my hands or maybe shake the laser pointer, and you can say, well, see, very, very clearly, we start now, and we have an entry then, humans in Earth orbit, humans Mars orbit in 2033. It's very straightforward. Yes, there it is. Great. But it is doable. It's very reasonable that it's doable, that you could pull this off. You just have to decide to do it. And the humans orbiting Mars mission is a very close analog to Apollo 8. And when that picture was taken on Isaac Newton's birthday eve in 1968, where you make sure you can get there and back without landing and all the difficulties and things that might go wrong landing. And then subsequent to that, if we are able to successfully orbit Mars, it's very reasonable that in the next 2, 4, or 6 years, or multiples of 26 months, you'd be able to land on Mars and do extraordinary things. Extraordinary things. You know, I spent a lot of time on the Mars rovers, mostly as an outsider, very briefly as an insider, and these robots are amazing. They bring out the absolute best in us, the best engineers, the best rover drivers, the best scientists to analyze what the rovers have found or shown us. And what those machines can do, operated by our best people, in a week, a human could do, it is reasoned, certainly in less than 5 minutes. And some of the experts who are especially good with rock hammers claim they could do it in less than a minute. So the scientific value of getting people to Mars would be exceptional, would be extraordinary. And it would be a worthy use of our intellect and treasure. And speaking of our treasure, before I go on, I just want to talk again about me. I was quoted in Space News doing my best to remind the world that what I say at the Planetary Society is, we are not crazy. In my opinion, we do not propose things that are not achievable. We do not suggest that we not only dare mighty things, but that we don't dare unrealistic mighty things. And so to this end, we developed not only the architecture, we came up with some budgets. And I know if you are any NASA people here or deal with NASA, who doesn't love a sand chart showing the amount of money to be spent? But the people that did this reasoning, I think, are very good. And I think that this is only an illustration. It is not, we are not proposing, we're not saying this is the way to do it. It is a case where you can show what everybody likes to call an existence proof. You can show that there would be a way to do it if you committed to it. And I think that's worthy of considering. 2033 is a pretty good, there's a lot of, there's a lot of great orbital opportunities, but 2033 is a good one. And we could get there without doing anything that's politically unreasonable. And I think it's worth everybody keeping in mind. So the other problem that has been around since I was a kid was this deal with bone loss. And I met Scott Kelly the other day, and he said, my legs still hurt. But he was able to walk when he came back. And so people think now that if you took the right regimen of nutrients or medicines, you could make this trip without any extraordinary artificial gravity. With that said, those of you familiar with the old days of Wernher von Braun, and then of course 2001 Space Odyssey, and even in Andy Weir's book and in the movie, they propose having a spinning thing that would create gravity. And I will say, I've spent time with submariners. Are there any submariners here? One guy, yeah. And you don't want me to pronounce it the other way, right? You're submariners. And these people, you can hang out with this guy. You can't quite see him in the light, but they're a little bit different from us. Where this is my world. This is all I need. I'm fine. This is good. I'm good here. This is fine. And then when they surface, oh, hi, this is great. Oh, you're still here. Oh, that's nice. But a lot of people, I think, I know astronauts are extraordinary individuals, but a lot of people sitting in a can for 200 days at least would be stressful. But maybe a solvable problem. Maybe a solvable problem. So we were all here last fall when NASA determined, or scientists determined, that there are almost certainly flows of liquid water on Mars. And people have talked about it several times today. But I just want to remind you all of what is potentially at stake here. Everywhere we look on Earth and find even the tiniest amount of liquid water, there are living things everywhere. So it is very reasonable to me that if Mars was once very wet, it's reasonable that life started there. And if Mars is wet today, it's very reasonable to me that there's something still alive. I am not claiming there is something still alive. I'm hypothesizing it and claiming that it is worth investigating. Now, the budget for the Planetary Science Division at NASA is up now over $1.5 billion, $1.7 billion. And that's a line item within the line item that is the NASA budget. For less than 10% of the NASA budget, we do these extraordinary things. We make these extraordinary discoveries on this other world. So I remind you that we could do amazing things in the short term with regard to astrobiology and astrobiological investigations in 2020, but then the missions after that, really looking diligently for life. And by way of example of the Surveyor spacecraft on the moon, people thought for a few minutes that these microbes had survived on the lunar surface for years, but it turned out it was probably contamination from a lab back here on Earth. So it's very easy when you send people anywhere to contaminate the place. And so we have to be very, very cognizant of that, not only spiritually or in terms of doing the right thing, but also there's a rule. We have a treaty that we're going to have to honor. Whoa, what did I do? What did I do? Oh, well, thank you very much. Okay. No. And SpaceX is planning to land a spacecraft, to launch one in 2018. And I'm sure you've heard this, Mars is hard. Getting in orbit around Mars is not so easy, let alone landing, but more power to that company. And they have agreed to abide by the cleanliness or sanitizing rules, sterilization rules that applied to Viking and Phoenix and Curiosity, Spirit, and Opportunity, any subsequent missions. And so they've agreed to abide by that. And this would be a technology demonstration that would probably use a new entry, descent, and landing system that has great promise. But everywhere you send something made by people, there's a potential for contamination. When you have something on the surface of this extraordinarily sterile surface of Mars, on the surface of the surface, excuse me. If you have something on the surface of Mars, it's extraordinarily hostile environment. It's very reasonable to me that after a few years of sitting there, everything from Earth would be dead. But you can't prove a negative. So what we'll need to do is negotiate what we believe are reasonable constraints and refuges and places to avoid contaminating on Mars. With that said, Mars has winds that go worldwide, and so we have to evaluate that. But I want everybody involved in this conference to keep in mind that we have an agreement that we will not violate the Prime Directive. And so the text of that's relevant, the states, the nations that signed the treaty, shall pursue studies of outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, and conduct exploration of them so as to avoid their harmful contamination. And the word harmful, you could argue about, but any contamination from Earth that prevents us from understanding any indigenous life on Mars would be really unfortunate. And it's avoidable, but I believe there's going to be a negotiation involved. So I'm here to remind you that this treaty exists and we have to keep it into account, keep it in mind and take it into account. So the Curiosity is in Gale Crater. It has a certain range, but I'm hoping that future missions or the landing is tuned or aimed at a place that really has the potential to help us look for signs of life. Because, as I say, it would change the world. Now, apparently you could drive Curiosity really carefully closer to one of these recurring slope lineae, but it's very difficult, and you have to get within 5 meters, and there are people that argue you can't even get that close and be assured that you haven't contaminated it. So we have to really discuss this and take a meeting about this. So I just like to remind everybody that the Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity rovers each carry a message to the future. It's written on the test pattern, the photometric calibration target for the cameras. And it says, among other things, we've built these instruments to study the Martian environment, to look for signs of water and life, to study Mars's past and prepare for our future. And then it says in these very small letters, to those who visit here, we wish a safe journey and the joy of discovery. And that, my friends, for me, is the reason to explore Mars, is to feel that joy of discovery, to know something that was heretofore unknowable, to answer these questions, where did we come from, and are we alone? And the other thing about this message that I find so compelling is it's optimistic. It expects humankind to survive human-caused climate change, to resolve enough worldwide conflicts to have the resources to go there, to provide water and electricity and access to information, to the internet, to everyone on Earth, and yet have people able to go to Mars and look around. So to wrap up, if you don't recognize them from where you're sitting, there's Earth. This is taken from above the orbit of Saturn. There's Mars. I guess that was easy enough. And we want to seek life, and we want to review that treaty and make sure we don't contaminate the place. And in order to do that, I claim we have to do everything all at once. We have to solve the political problems, the economic problems, and the technical problems of going to Mars. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, thank you. So my understanding is we have time for a few questions. And I know most of you are members of the Planetary Society, but for those of you who aren't, I remind you, you can join right now on your electric phone machine. Yes, so we'll start with man in orange. Yes.
Bill, good afternoon. My name is Jack
20 years in the Planetary Society, right on. Yes, you're the man. Thank you for your support.
Listening to Planetary Radio every week.
There's Matt Kaplan, the host of Planetary Radio. Shake his hand, sir.
You do a wonderful job. Well done.
Matt's got the radio voice.
Okay, now, I sent you a nice Christmas card with a little note about my 20 years, and I posed one question. We have The Martian, which, you know, has sold millions of copies.
More power to him.
Okay, and it was on the bestseller list 31 weeks. The movie probably grossed close to $1 billion.
And you're saying, where's your cut?
Well, no, no, I'm happy for anybody who's successful, but why all these people are going out looking and reading about Mars? Why hasn't it translated into a groundswell of interest and support for planetary exploration?
You have hit the nail on the head, my friend. Thank you. My claim is that after the Cold War was resolved, this is to say, after people successfully landed on the moon, the president felt that public interest in space exploration, going to the moon, was waning. And my understanding from reading John Logsdon's book is that he was also concerned about deaths of astronauts, really concerned about how bad it would be if we accidentally killed some people. I mean, Apollo 13 is a heroic thing, but what if it didn't work out so well? So the NASA budget then became another line item. And I'm sure historians argue about this, but subsequently, eventually, the Soviet Union went out of business and was replaced by a different style of government, at least this different provinces separated for sure. And so what we hope is, by using robots in advance, reasonably priced robots, and integrating the efforts of Andy Weir and the movie makers Ridley Scott and Jessica Chastain and Drew Goddard, who wrote that line that we all love with the SH word in it, that we will get people excited about it. But for you, as far as your expectations, I don't think we're going to have 10 times the NASA budget anytime soon. Instead, what we're hoping at the Planetary Society is to focus people and understand that it is possible to get an orbit around Mars in 2033, or maybe an orbital cycle sooner or later, if you just decided to do it. And right now, at least, NASA is involved in all kinds of things. And so that focus isn't there for all sorts of political reasons, but I really appreciate your support. I will be in Congress tomorrow, doing my best to be charming and convince these men and women that this is a worthy use of our tax dollars and treasure and intellect. Yes, so the guy in blue behind you was first. Thank you. The guy in, yes, I say blue, you're backlit. Yeah, next to you. Do you have a joint question? Yes, sir, yes. Yes, guy without a okay.
Hi.
Guy without a jacket on, where are we? Who's got somebody speak.
Here.
I hear a microphone.
I have a microphone, so I guess I'll speak.
Yes.
Okay. I was curious, since you're going to Congress, and since you've been steeped in this whole problem of budget between planetary exploration and Earth exploration and Earth science, climate change, and human exploration, we all know it's fundamentally budget limited. But I think that there's a lot of synergy that's possible between these three endeavors. And I think it would be wise and very helpful to spend a lot of time considering how to exploit the synergy between green technology and exploration technology. And is this a message you are prepared to carry to the Hill, or will think much about?
Sure, yes. As I say, I'd like to do everything all at once. But when it comes to space exploration, it brings together the strangest of bedfellows. Very conservatives and very progressive people work together on missions to other planets. When it comes to exploring the Earth or monitoring the Earth, they don't always work together so well. But we'll see. My board of directors has me focus on planetary exploration, meaning other planets. But as a citizen, voter, and taxpayer, I am concerned about the Earth's environment. So we will do our best, sir, to point out that it's a win-win-win-win if we use space technologies to improve the lives of everyone on Earth. Like to providing information technology, almost certainly be satellite assets. So here, the guy in the light-colored shirt. Yeah, you would. Yes, stand up. Give us. Let them hear you outside. Blow the roof off the dump.
Hi, Mr. Nye. My name is Tyreek. My question was, there's been talk largely propagated by Elon Musk that sufficient terraforming of Mars would require rapid climate change, either caused by nuclear detonation or the release of greenhouse gases. So I wanted your educated opinion on how this would comply with the Contamination Treaty.
Oh, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's fine. You guys, look, I love you all. I love you all more than life itself, okay? I am here. I could be a lot of places, okay? But look, you guys, terraforming a planet is not trivial. It's not something you just show up and do. We cannot blow up nuclear weapons on this planet, let alone put them in Earth orbit, let alone fly them someplace else. Not because it's technically not feasible, but because people don't want nuclear weapons going off anywhere. So everybody, we have a planet for which we are perfectly suited. We got here over 3.5 billion years of life, which may have, from an extraordinary but not crazy standpoint, may have started on another world. And we are actually descendants of Mars. That is like extraordinary but worth investigating. Everybody, terraforming another world just ain't so easy. Now, I think we all have this expectation. Many, many of us, my ancestors came from Europe. Many of us have ancestors that came from Europe, or ancestors that came from places that were colonized. And this expectation that you land on one shore, march across a continent, eating whatever is out there, drinking the water, certainly breathing the air, is something you would do routinely. When you show up on Mars and you open the cabin door, if you don't have your helmet on, you will notice that right away. Okay, it got so out of hand. Does anybody know the state motto of California? Anybody? It's Eureka. I found it. So these European settlers, after maybe they had smallpox, whatever they had, they made it all the way across North American continent. They show up, they get to the Sacramento Delta, and they're fish like this. It's estimated that the wealthiest First Nations tribes were in the Pacific Northwest because the salmon would just swim into their lap. They just had all the protein they needed. Then oranges are like weeds. And in California, it got so out of hand, the rocks are made of gold. Like, whoa. Well, everybody, when you get to Mars, it's not going to be like that. I love you more than life itself. Okay, you can't just, we'll have a fusion reactor and we'll set it up and cool, yeah. No, it's not so easy, you guys. So just keep in mind that this whole thing, terraforming, is and look, I grew up with the first Star Trek. I'm kooky for terraforming, all right? But it's not so easy. Instead, everybody, we need a measured approach that's realistic, that is achievable, that we can do not only technically, but politically. Thank you for your question. You hit the nail on the head. Thank you. Yes, Bill, would you cool it? Yeah. So that's all the time we have? Anyway, thanks, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Consider joining the Planetary Society. And together we can, dare I say it, change the world. Thanks, you guys. Thank you.